It was mid-morning on Wednesday, and I was sitting in my car in front of the Piccolo Motel, eagerly awaiting the arrival of my wife. We had been living together for over 3 years. By noon, she was supposed to meet Glenn Eam, her former school friend whom I also knew well, in room 145. It struck me that Glenn had been a close friend of mine until recently. It's funny how things work out, isn't it? Ellie was supposed to be my wife, wasn't she? She and Glenn were high school sweethearts and had been dating all that time. It was Glenn who took her virginity after graduation. I distinctly remember the evening he bragged about his conquest, proudly talking about how he had won her over. He drove a large Chrysler truck with a spacious bed and an elongated cabin, always prepared with blankets and various things for spontaneous plans. Glenn was always ready for anything. This jerk was bragging to us about how he did it, during a late-night conversation after we all finished work that summer right after high school graduation. I still remember his words clearly, "Guys, I managed to pick her up after graduation." Apparently, she changed into her cousin's prom dress and wore a black Harley-Davidson t-shirt with super short jeans. She was undeniably attractive, with long curly brown hair cascading down her back, striking green eyes, and eyelashes that seemed to last forever. She had lovely small breasts and a toned ass. I mentioned that we were heading to Jed Nelson's gathering after graduation but suggested taking a short break before that. I explained that I wanted to share something important with her. I subtly hinted that I could propose marriage to her. Seeing that she was already on edge, I quietly slipped a couple of pills into her drink. In the blink of an eye, she was full of energy and desire. When she took off her jeans, I couldn't help but admire her beauty. She sat down on the blanket, and tears began to flow, silent tears streaming down her face as she looked at me, waiting for me to speak. I completely forgot what I wanted to say, so I blurted out that I had joined the Navy and would be leaving at the end of next week. I begged her to wait for me, to which she stopped crying and said she would think about it. I walked her home, wished her good night, and kissed her before leaving. We never made it to Jed's party where he promised to share one of his ridiculous stories, as always. I lingered on the outskirts of the gathering. Glenn, Ellie, and I were childhood friends, growing up together and attending the same schools from elementary to middle school. Glenn seemed to have everything: charm, money, athletic talent, and the admiration of all the girls. But despite numerous opportunities, he didn't succeed in anything. He was on the football team but eventually got expelled. He tried basketball and was expelled, and in baseball, he couldn't hit the ball. Despite his failures, he always had excuses for why things didn't work out. The football coach was unpleasant, small players elbowed him in basketball, and he claimed the referees were unfair in baseball. Despite this, he always managed to attract girls' attention. He became the prom king in our senior year and was voted the most memorable guy in the yearbook. I also played sports. My name is Wyatt Templeton. I joined the football team, skipped basketball, and excelled in volleyball throughout all 4 years. I played on the lacrosse team during the spring season. It seemed that physical attributes mattered a lot. Glenn was a big, muscular guy who did weightlifting while I had always been thin. Though I couldn't keep up with the larger players in football, I excelled in running. In winter, my coach discovered my talent for jumping, which earned me a spot on the volleyball team. Lacrosse remained my main passion, where I played center. Despite Glenn's popularity with girls and the accolades he received, it seemed to me that I was just collecting letters. Glenn excelled at socializing in high school, and I did my best to keep up. Growing up in a large family, my mother's old car was our only means of transportation. Though I didn't have many opportunities for dating, I made do with what I had. After high school, Glenn went to Pennsylvania with financial support from his family while I stayed behind and received a partial scholarship to a nearby state university. Although it wasn't much, it helped me get started. Having committed to teaching in the state for 3 years, I became a teacher in a public school. Accepting this profession meant accepting a modest income, but I remained dedicated to my job, driven by my love for children. Meanwhile, Glenn continued to pursue higher education at the University of Pennsylvania and eventually landed a lucrative position at one of the city's well-known law firms. He boasted of his considerable income, far exceeding mine. When I looked at my watch, I saw that it was already 11:40 p.m., and the end of the working day was approaching. I was determined to find out if I had a wife and family, no matter what it cost me. This situation upset and disappointed me. Glenn went to Pennsylvania, and I stayed at home. I've always had feelings for Ellie, also known as Ellie Colleen Templeton, formerly Cochran. Ellie graduated from high school and continued her studies at the community college, focusing on computer programming and software. I've never been able to grasp these concepts. Computers are like cars to me. I understand the basics, but nothing more. I have enough practicality to step back if I encounter something unfavorable. Despite studying plenty of car maintenance materials, I treat them the same as plumbing. Attempting to fix them only leads to more problems. When we first moved into our house, Ellie needed a new dishwasher, sink, and countertop. After studying and purchasing the necessary equipment, I decided to install everything myself. Everything seemed straightforward, but I encountered difficulties. I was determined to fix the leaking copper tube, but no matter what I did, it wouldn't stop. Ellie called her father for help. He arrived and quickly fixed the problem. I remember him patting me on the shoulder and complimenting my efforts. Ellie made coffee, and we all sat down at the table to enjoy a cup. She expressed pride that I had tried to solve the problem, though I felt foolish for not being able to do it myself. I appreciated the praise. It lifted my spirits. Meanwhile, Glenn was studying in Pennsylvania. He earned a reputation for himself, became the president of the fraternity, and a devoted fan of the Nittany Lions. I also made a name for myself by consistently making the dean's list every semester after my freshman year while managing part-time work for a year. Glenn returned home every summer, using his vacations to surf and socialize with numerous women on the beach. Meanwhile, I focused on mustering the courage to ask Ellie out during the summer break between freshman and sophomore years. We had been close friends since childhood, always talking and chatting. I've had feelings for her for as long as I can remember. There was a moment in high school when I kissed her, and she blushed. I felt both elation and horror. Kissing Ellie Cochran was a huge achievement. She kissed me back but asked me not to tell Glenn, which disappointed me. I nearly confessed my love for her until she made me promise not to say anything. It was a moment when I almost made a rash decision, but in the end, I restrained myself. Can you believe how foolish I was? When I finally plucked up the courage to ask her out, she agreed. I decided to take her to the chic seafood restaurant, Sailor's Harvest, located outside the city. I wanted to make this evening special, treating her to a nice dinner before heading to the city for a play. I thought it would be a cool and memorable evening. Let me remind you, I never claimed to know anything about cars. After buying a used Hyundai with high mileage, the seller assured me that the engine was in good working order and would likely last another 10 years. He wasn't wrong. In the first 2 weeks of ownership, the car performed perfectly. Holding Ellie's hand, I couldn't help but admire how stunning she looked in a pale blue mini dress, nylon stockings, and high-heeled shoes. Despite her short stature, Ellie seemed taller than me in her heels. Although I initially felt awkward, I soon found myself captivated by her presence. I've always felt awkward around Ellie. I can chat endlessly on various topics, but whenever I found myself beside Ellie, it was difficult to finish a sentence. Her big green eyes mesmerized me, leaving me speechless when she smiled. When I went to her door and spoke to her parents while Ellie packed, I felt their approval. I walked her to her car, helped her inside, and we set off. However, about 2/3 of the way to the restaurant, my newly purchased Hyundai suddenly stalled, leaving us in a difficult situation. I opened the hood, got out of the car, and looked underneath, but confusion froze me. I had no idea what caused the problem. Ellie joined me, smiling sympathetically. I had dinner and show tickets booked, but the car chose to break down at the worst possible moment. Feeling frustrated, I glanced back at the car. Ellie reached into her purse, took out her phone, and called her father for help. He arrived about 30 minutes later, attached an old tire to the front of his car, and pushed us towards their house. I was sitting alone in my car, driving, while he pushed. Ellie rode in her father's car. I felt like I was stuck between two pieces of bread. We went back to Ellie's house and had a barbecue with her parents and younger brother. Later, we watched an old movie on TV. When Robert Redford kissed Jane Fonda, Ellie mentioned that she had already watched the Playcats. Glenn had taken her to New York to see a Broadway show, marking an important date with Ellie. Looking at my watch again, I saw that it was already 11:45 p.m. I thought about my actions, wondering why I was in this situation. Deep down, I always knew that Glenn would eventually come back to claim what he considered his prize. I was hoping that Ellie had distanced herself from him, but it seems I was wrong. Remembering our wedding day, I recalled how I tried to persuade Ellie to become my wife. After a bad first date, she decided to give it another try. It was the end of summer, and the city's carnivals were in full swing. I couldn't help but remember the previous year when Ellie won a beauty contest in our city during her senior year of high school. Despite the rainy weather, she was proclaimed queen on the second evening of the carnival. Glenn was supposed to be there, but for some reason, he stayed on the beach. As a result, I became her escort, knowing that I only got this job because she really wanted Glenn, although she didn't talk about it. As I said, it was raining outside, not just a light drizzle but a real downpour. Ellie had brought her usual clothes, but for the parade and coronation, she bought a special outfit, a stunning white mini dress. Unfortunately, the heavens opened suddenly, and in the blink of an eye, Ellie was completely soaked. Her beautiful dress, made of a delicate material similar to linen or cotton, stuck to her wet body. She was standing on a platform completely exposed to the public. I pretended not to notice anything and quickly ran off the platform. Noticing an elderly man's raincoat nearby, I grabbed it without hesitation. I hurried back to cover her, but the glossy enamel paint of the platform made it dangerously slippery in the rain. Despite my best efforts, I slipped and fell off the platform while putting the raincoat on Ellie. Lying on the wet grass below, I couldn't decide which hurt more, my pride or my body. I was sitting on the wet grass, torn between my pride and my pain, too embarrassed to go back upstairs. I watched Ellie sit on her throne and accept the crown and scepter without even looking in my direction. A wide smile graced her face, making it graceful and beautiful, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was laughing at me, too. When the rain stopped, we walked around the fairgrounds. Her dress dried up and stopped being transparent to others. Everything was as I expected, my brown leaves were stained with grass and my t-shirt was dirty. She looked like the city princess she was, and I looked like the city idiot. We went to the games and food stalls, stopping to eat beef and French fries. I treated her to a meat patty, cake, and ice cream. When I took her home, she thanked me with a kiss on the cheek. In a way, it was like a date. After the problems with the car, we continued to walk and enjoy simple entertainment. We watched movies, had picnics, swam in the park, and ate hot dogs. I treasure that summer, considering it something special. But towards the end of the season, Glenn reappeared and took Ellie on dates every night, making me feel invisible. I despised Glenn 9 for that. When the clock showed 11:50 p.m., I realized it was time. How did I convince Ellie to marry me? It was like a miracle. As everyone knows about lone wolves, I was a loner in love. Some animals become strongly attached to one owner and remain faithful all their lives. That's how I've always felt about relationships. Although I've dated other girls, I've never been able to shake the feeling that they weren't right for me. While some men fantasize about movie stars, my thoughts have always been with Ellie. It seems all men have their own dreams, and for me, Ellie has always been first. There were two sides to Ellie, the conquering hero and the suffering hero. It didn't matter to me which one she was because, in my eyes, she was always perfect. Her name was Ellie, and I couldn't believe she agreed to marry me. I was happier than ever. From the end of our first summer vacation until our senior year, Ellie and I had a relationship that flared up and died down. Due to my limited funds, our dates were always on a budget. We loved events like demolition races, tractor pulls, carnivals, apple festivals, minor league baseball games, the state fair, and horse shows. Ellie had a deep passion for horse riding, considering it more a religion than a simple hobby, and I share her love for this sport. Ellie has had her own car since she was a child, but I've never been able to afford one. Glenn had a car too. Yes, I took her to church with me at every opportunity. Maybe it was a budget date, but I wanted to show her my character. We both belong to the Methodist faith, and they say that all Methodists like to sing and eat. I can confirm that Ellie has a wonderful voice. Now that we're married, she sings in the church choir and looks angelic in her attire. I can only hope that I will be as blessed as she is. I proposed to Ellie in the fall of her senior year after she had already graduated from college and started working for a local software company. She traveled all over the area, repaired broken computers, and even started creating her own programs and games. I am not the best person to ask for an explanation about technology, as I have made my position on it clear. At the same time, Glenn, who constantly annoyed me as a student, was a senior at the University of Pennsylvania and was often absent, which pleased me. Upon returning home, Glenn immediately asked Ellie out on a date, to which she readily agreed. I couldn't get rid of the feeling that I was always in second place. Glenn did not return home from Thanksgiving empty-handed. He brought with him an amazing woman named Masha Ashcroft, with long blonde hair, beautiful breasts, an incredible figure, and captivating brown eyes. Masha was truly attractive. Glenn proudly introduced Masha to his family and friends, confidently stating that he planned to marry her. We all congratulated the happy couple. Ellie kissed Glenn and Masha, and I did the same. I shook Glenn's hand until they left, and then I got down to business. I finally felt that Glenn was really out of the game. Now it was my turn. Despite having other guys around, I was sure that I was now Ellie's number one choice after Glenn. Determined, I went to the mall, bought a ring, and prepared my proposal. I decided to do it in her family's house. It was a big modern house with a beautiful basement in the form of a club. I planned to take her downstairs and ask her the question since her brother was in school and I assumed he wouldn't be home on Friday night. I called Ellie and convinced her to come downstairs to play video games. She always liked to win, so it was easy to persuade her. When we went downstairs, her parents and brother were upstairs. We returned to the playroom and settled down on the couch in front of the big TV. I knelt down and took out a tiny ring box, opening it to reveal the ring inside. Ellie, I began, but she interrupted me, surprised. I hesitated, fearing rejection. Well, Ellie grabbed me and pulled me onto the couch, telling me to kiss her. That's what I did. While we were kissing, she started undoing the buttons on my shirt. By the time our first kiss was over, she had taken off both my shirt and t-shirt. I put my hands on her hips while she kissed me, fully clothed. After a few more kisses, she leaned back on the couch and looked at me intently. Well, she asked. I bent down and kissed her again, feeling like I was in heaven. Suddenly, her brother started walking down the stairs. After going down 3 steps, he heard Ellie's loud voice, "Vernon, come back upstairs." Her brother's name was Vernon. Then her father's voice sounded even louder, "Vernon, come back." Ellie pulled me towards her, unbuckling my belt and jeans. We were sitting completely undressed on the couch in the playroom in her parents' basement while Mom, Dad, and brother were upstairs. I distinctly heard their conversation. On that unforgettable night, I became a man at the age of 21. I had never been with a woman before that night and remained innocent. It was a truly magical evening that I will never forget, and I believe that she felt the same way. We walked slowly together, exchanging kisses, hugs, and touches. Gradually, we began to explore each other's bodies with our hands and then with our lips. Although I knew she was not innocent, that evening she managed to convince me otherwise. Looking back, I realized that she may have been as nervous as I was. In literature, this is often called contact, but I wanted to call it something else. For me, it was love, pure, sincere, unconditional love. Ellie whispered softly in my ear, expressing her desire for me to make her feel like a woman. I wondered if she could somehow read my mind. When we lay together, our bodies intertwined, we just snuggled up to each other. I showered kisses on her face and head, and she caressed my body with gentle hands. After a while, we both sat up. Ellie's expression turned serious and she asked to see the ring. I found my trousers, took the ring out of the box, and handed it to her. She held out her left hand, or at least I think it was her left hand, and told me to put the ring on her finger. When I did this, I couldn't help but notice that the diamond, although small, just over a quarter of a carat, seemed to shimmer and shine in the soft light of the table lamp. She examined her hand, then looked at me, and I decided that this was the end of our relationship. She explained that no one else exists for us. I was puzzled and asked for clarification. She looked at me sternly and stressed that now it would be just the two of us without outsiders. I realized that she was the only one for me all this time. I expressed my feelings to her, admitting that she was my everything. She smiled back. I had the same feeling. I didn't quite understand what she meant when she said for her too. Even now, I'm still not sure. After getting dressed, we went upstairs to her parents. Ellie proudly showed them the ring, but their reaction was more relieved than joyful. I used to think I knew why, but now I'm not sure. And that was the beginning of everything. Ellie and I had officially become a couple, and we were proud to share this news with our friends, who admired her ring. Everyone, including Glenn, was delighted for us. A magical moment happened in November when we were young, madly in love, and unaware of possible problems. She had a solid job that allowed her to work remotely, and I was doing well in my studies, specializing in mathematics and education. Thanks to the exceptional math teachers and my strong academic and athletic background, getting a teaching position in the district was an easy task. Our wedding was scheduled for June, but soon there was a slight hitch. If two lovers regularly make love without protection, pregnancy is an inevitable consequence of this. In mid-January, we found out that we were expecting a baby, and this forced us to postpone the wedding to March. Our daughter Jenny was born in July. Around the same time I started working as a math teacher at a county high school. In addition, I was asked to help with the preparation of the girls' soccer team at this school. When I looked at my watch, it read 11:55 p.m. It won't be long before my world, filled with dreams and fantasies of a blissful future, will be destroyed. My Ellie will soon come face to face with Mr. Big Shot Glenn Evers. I read her letters and knew that she was waiting for him. These letters were driving me crazy. Why did she leave her email open? Why didn't she protect it with a password? She had secret accounts and passwords that I didn't know anything about. This shouldn't have happened. Did she leave them open on purpose? Did she want me to understand? Was she really that unhappy with me? Was I really such a bad husband? I tried my best. God knows, despite our financial difficulties, I tried to compensate for them in other ways. I devoted myself completely to her. I assured her of my love every day. I tried to give her everything that money couldn't buy. Was it our closeness? I consider myself a good partner, but I have no other experience to compare it with. Ellie is the only woman I've ever been with. I'm not kidding. Ellie is the one I love the most. I have never harmed her or done anything to embarrass her. I always try to be strong and gentle with her at the same time. After watching a movie with Meg Ryan, I learned how some women can pretend to have real pleasure. With Ellie, I can tell when she's really in the mood. I always try to focus on her pleasure. There were times when she was not in the mood to make love. For example, when she was stressed because of Jenny and Craig, who was born 3 years after our daughter. Or when her back hurt. At such moments, I gave her a massage to ease her discomfort. I like giving her a back massage. I feel a connection between us. She means everything to me and I pray that nothing will change that. Am I really not coping with the role of a father? Jenny is already 3 years old and Craig is just a baby. Of course, I can sometimes raise my voice as all men do, but I do my best to be near my children. I read Jenny bedtime stories and take her for walks, trying to create the same memories as my parents. I try to be a good father, one that others admire. I try very hard to work around the house. I cook dinner, wash dishes, take care of the lawn, help with flowers, and use a vacuum cleaner. I am always ready to help her with whatever she needs because her happiness is important to me. When Ellie is unwell, I try to be close to her. I don't run off to the tavern or anywhere else. I show my affection by kissing her often and cuddling up to her when we go to bed. Recently, I came across Ellie's secret account, which aroused my curiosity but did not arouse any suspicions. I opened the message and immediately regretted it. Glenn, that scoundrel, had the audacity to ask if he could see her, stating that he missed her and was lonely in his marriage. He was looking for someone to confide in. I couldn't help but think about what a snake he was in the grass. But then I read Ellie's answer. She gracefully asked him to step back, reminding him that she was married and busy. She advised him to talk to his wife or consult a psychologist if he was really unhappy. He kept sending her emails, constantly whining and begging her to pay attention to him. He claimed that he needed someone and that she was the only one who truly understood him. Despite her resistance, he persisted. Eventually, Ellie's behavior changed. She began to think about how they went to school and how much fun they had before he got engaged to Marcia. She started discussing their past, not including me, which eventually caused pain in my heart. Glenn suddenly appeared in the doorway of the motel room. I narrowed my eyes while sitting in the car so as not to catch his eye. Why am I so worried? I'm just across the street in the parking lot, watching him closely. I noticed how he looked around before entering room 45. He went out for a moment, then took out his cell phone and called. I suspected that he was talking to Ellie, informing her of his whereabouts. Panic seized me. I was afraid that my life was unfolding before my eyes. I prayed that Ellie wouldn't come. Why was I so worried? I saw the email she sent and it was clear how excited she was about it. She had already shown signs of betrayal, whether in her actions or just in her thoughts. If she doesn't do it today, she'll probably do it in the future. It's hard to read her words on the screen, but seeing it in reality is even more heartbreaking. It's almost noon now and that moment is approaching. For me, a parent of 2 children and a third on the way, this situation is especially difficult. Yes, Jenny was born in July, 3 years and 2 months ago. Craig made his debut last October and recently Ellie mentioned that she missed 2 periods. 3 children by a dishonest, unfaithful woman. No, I shouldn't say that. Ellie would never do that. But here he is. He's standing over there and all because of these letters, these damned letters. I wish I hadn't looked at them at all. Although I must give her due, at first she resisted, then she became intrigued and now she is discussing his wife, Marcia. Ellie persistently reminded him of his wife, asking questions like, "What about your wife and why do you want to do this to her?" She urged him to talk to his wife, reminding him that Marcia loved him and deserved to talk. Despite Glenn's excuses that his wife did not understand him and he had never loved her as much as Ellie continued to defend Marcia's interests, arguing that she was faithful and deserved better. Ellie fought for Marcia, not allowing Glenn to ignore his responsibilities to his wife. She couldn't have handled this task better if she had been Marcia herself. But in the end, it didn't change anything. Last week, Ellie finally gave up and agreed to meet with him. And now we're here. My marriage, my life, and maybe Glenn and Marcia's marriage will end soon. I want to make it clear that I did not ignore this situation. I discussed it with my father, who shares my belief that when a man and a woman agree to get married, they give their hearts and souls to each other. The most precious thing in my life is with Ellie now. I want her to know that I don't want to control her, but she also promised herself to me. She declared that there was no one else for her, and her heart, soul, and body belonged to me just as mine belonged to her. I will not tolerate betrayal or deception. I am ready to provide for her and our children financially, even if it means living in poverty. I refuse to be deceived. Looking at my watch, I saw that it was already 12:15 p.m. Glenn has already come to the door 3 times. I can't help but wonder if Ellie is running late. It occurs to me that maybe she won't come. If she doesn't come, I'll tell her about the letters. I'll try to make her understand. We can consult a psychologist. My love for her is immense. I'd rather die than be without her. I have always been faithful to her and I cannot imagine life without her. Ellie's absence is like a slow death. I beg her to stay at home and not show up. But what if she does come? I already know the outcome. If she shows up, it will be the end. I refuse to accept it. I'm going to leave. We're going to have to get divorced. I will not live as a weak, powerless person. It's not in my nature. Please, Ellie, don't come. Time passes and it torments me. I have to find a solution. I have to make a call. I quickly dial Ellie's number on my mobile phone and she picks up the phone after just one ring. Hi, it's me, Wyatt, I say. What are you doing now? Where are you? Ellie answers, I'm home, Wyatt. Jenny's in the nursery, Craig's sleeping upstairs, and I'm ironing one of your shirts. After a moment of silence, Ellie asks, where are you? Shouldn't you be in class? I say emphatically, no, Ellie, I'm in my car right now, parked in front of the Piccolo Motel.